All right, everybody, I guess we'll get started. Thanks for joining us at lunchtime, first day of Dreamforce, Columbus Day. My name is JD Vogt. I'm a principal designer here at Salesforce, been for about 2.5 years.
And my name is Mark Brett. I'm an architect in the search team. I'm working from the Grenoble office, which is, you may have guessed, from in France. And I've been working on search for Service Cloud. I have been also working on relevancy and type ahead.
And so we're going to talk today mostly about the examples we're going to show are mostly mobile examples. We're going to talk about how to build out a mobile search experience with REST APIs. So first things first, this was on BuzzFeed this morning, top 21 things that are only people at Dreamforce would understand. Number 17, you cannot stop daydreaming about the safe harbor statement. Guess what the next slide is? Safe harbor statement. So we're a publicly traded company. Please make your buying decisions only on the products commercially available from Salesforce. And before I begin, just a quick note that when considering future developments, whether by us or with other solution providers, you should always base your purchasing decisions based on what is currently available. Good? All right. You'll see that 1,000,000 times this week. Okay, so a quick outline. We're going to talk about just about how we actually find. We're going to look at some mobile search UI examples, talk about consumer versus enterprise search. We have a demo to show you some new capabilities, and we'll dig into the details of that and implementation notes. All right, so first, how do we find? So it's good when we're looking at designing systems, instead of just jumping right into the mechanics of how everything works, it's kind of good to take a step back and look at, we have this system, the real world, right? And how do people interact with the real world? And so when we build systems for users, we want to leverage what they already know and understand about interacting with the world as it is, and leverage those intuitions that they have about how things actually work. So when we talk about how do we actually find, the things that we do as humans is like, we look around, we scan the environment, we try to remember things, we recognize things in the environment, we navigate to get to where we want to go, and then we'll ask. And when we talk about recall, there we try to remember something versus recognizing something. This is an important principle in that if we can put things in front of users that they recognize versus having to remember, that's less of a cognitive load for them, and they can kind of get their task done faster. So we want to put things out there that they recognize. So in this instance, we're asking here, right? And so I think gender-wise, men don't tend to ask for directions as much, but this guy is wise enough to know that it's smart to ask a policeman for directions to how to get to where he wants to go. And so he sees the policeman as an affordance in the environment, like, hey, I want to get to Michigan Avenue. This guy looks like an authority that I could ask, and he'll give me a good answer. And also, search is a conversation, and then the answer can change the question. When we're new to a domain, we ask these really naive sort of questions, right? How do things actually work? And as we gain expertise in the system, we start to ask much more precise questions. And so we'll see this in enterprise users where they'll have very specific questions they have of the system, and they kind of know how to formulate those to get to the results that they want. So in the real world and in the systems that we build, there can be an overwhelming amount of information. And so in the real world, what we do is we chunk this out, right? And so you can look at this grocery store here, and they don't put the aspirin next to a box of cereal, next to a bottle of soda, right? These things are chunked out in the grocery store so that we can kind of look at the environment and say, well, this looks like the right place or it's not the right place to go and find these things. And so it's important to group like things with like things. And so they're in close proximity to each other so that users have a sense of how to get around the system. Okay, now bonus points here. There are 3 people in this picture. Can you spot these people?
You told me already, and I still can't
You
see
see,
them.
there's two down here, and there's one. It's hard to see. I think he's up here someplace. So the amazing thing about search technology is it augments our ability to find. So we don't actually have to walk down the aisles to find that particular thing. We can just go ahead and type something in, and the pickles are magically brought to us, right? We didn't have to go down the relish aisle and find the pickles and pick them up. We can just type a few characters and bring them to us. It's also important that when we talk about relevancy and the results that users get back, they need to stand out from the environment, right? This means compressing and blurring the information that's not as important and bring those things forward. Much as we would notice a flower in a darkened forest, right? We want to bring our content forward that same way so users can see it and then act on it. And now sometimes we find purely for just because we want to find something, but often it's about action, right? And so we want to reduce the number of steps that users have to take once they find something to go ahead and take action on it. All right, so we're just going to take a look at some mobile search UI examples here. So I picked one that we all probably know, which is Google. And so this is the Google on the iOS. So if you download the Google iOS app, this is what you get as the home screen. And down at the bottom, they've got links to the Google Now, so these are essentially queries that you might want to look at. So these are, here's the weather, or here's how far it is to get home with traffic. But the main thing is that they got a very clear affordance for starting your search. So you tap into that search box, or you tap on the microphone if you want to do a voice search. Once you tap into that, you get this immersive modal. So you can kind of think of this as almost like a layer on top of that previous page. And so you have the search box up there, the keyboard has come up, and there's this thing called a zero state suggestion. So this is, again, like helping save the user steps. So instead of them having to remember something, they can recognize things that might be important to them here. So you can see some of my recent searches that I've done, Green Bay Packers, boat, Argentina versus the Netherlands, and they save the things in your history that you can kind of like, oh, I just want to go back to that thing. Very helpful in maps. A lot of times I'll look something up on Google Maps on my laptop at home, and then when I get out to the car, if I open up the Google Maps on there, I can see that last search and just get the directions on my phone. As you start typing, these suggestions change underneath to match the term that you've typed in, and they offer what we call type-ahead suggestions. So these are not results, these are queries that people tend to write once they type in, let's say, the word fishing. So a lot of people that type in fishing also tend to look up fishing licenses in California or a fishing report, right? So they offer those so you don't have to type as many characters, you just tap that and then essentially it finishes your query for you. Also wanted to point out that this can be confusing sometimes when putting these interfaces together, is the X and then the cancel button. So in iOS, you'll have this little cancel, that's for the search modal that comes up. The X clears the term. So if I tap the X right here, it just puts it back to that zero state, right? And the cancel would take me, so if I tap the X, it would go to here. If I tapped cancel, it goes back to here. Once I perform the search, these are, different things look different from each other. So of course, they put their ads up on top, but then I've got a map there to kind of help chunk out some of this information, right? So here's the map, and then down below are some pictures, and then some websites about fishing. And it's also interesting, you can on the bottom there, you can kind of move over, and if I want to tap on images, I can get these visually different results. It issues the same query for me, but different results, they look very different, and you can see some of the lunker fish that people pull out of San Francisco Bay. So just to kind of contrast that, here's an example from LinkedIn, which is a little bit more like an enterprise search scenario, where I start on my home page here, and it gives me people I may know or things that are going on. When I tap into this search box, it essentially gives me a Rolodex of things of my address book. This one's mine. And so I can kind of scroll through that and see all the people in there. And as I start typing, they show instant results, right? So as I'm typing, they're showing me actual results, not queries. These are names that match. And when I go and type in John, I can see John Biederman and John Hillman and other people who are in my first circle, people named John. If I wanted to switch to a different entity, I can tap over into jobs or companies or groups. And so just wanted to point out there's a little bit of a difference here between what we think of as consumer sort of search and versus enterprise-y types of searches that people do and what we see in research and observing users. So in the consumer, there can be many correct answers to a given query. So if I want to look up fishing in San Francisco Bay, there's a ton of websites that tell me about fishing, right? And all of them are valid and all of them are good. Users are often not aware of all the content of the system because it's the web, it's gigantic, you know, and so you're kind of more this exploratory sort of space often. But in enterprise, there's often only one correct answer. So I can tell you, there is only one John Biederman. If you knew him, you would know there's only one John Biederman, right, as far as I'm concerned. And so when I'm looking for that, I'm not looking for like a list of John Biedermans. I'm looking for my John Biederman. And users often know or they can guess the contents of the system. It's sort of a known item search. This is often because they put the stuff in themselves, right?
So how do we implement all this concept? Salesforce provide a lot of API to implement zero states. It also provides full text search. And there was one missing element so far, which was the type ahead API. And in Winter 15, we introduced a new API for type ahead, which is called Search Suggested Records. And this API now allows you to type ahead the name of any, or at least most, of the record in the system. We have built up this little demo that we will show you just next that illustrates how you can integrate this API to implement your own search experience. We go through the demo, then we will deconstruct the screens to show the UX concept, and then I will go through each of them and show you which API we used and what you be careful with.
All right, so let's go to this little demo here. Great, so this is a little contact app that we made up. Two amazing things about this contact app. One, it uses the new Search API. The second is it allows you to contact jazz legends from the past. So you can call Wes Montgomery or Stan Getz. Miles Davis never returns my calls. I'm not sure why. So on this homepage, this homepage doesn't really work in our demo. We just kind of made this as a placeholder. But we have kind of grouped, essentially we've done some serendipitous queries for you here, suggested them. Here's contacts you're meeting with today, contacts that are located nearby or based nearby, and then recently viewed contacts in case you want to get back to those quickly. So just some quick things that you might be able to skip the search experience entirely. When I tap into the search then, again, we show the recents up here, so in case you want to look at James Brown, and this is a different James Brown, he's a receiving clerk. So you can just go ahead and tap that and get to James Brown there. If I start typing, let's type in, there's a couple of people named Miles, so I can type in Miles Davis here. And so this is the type ahead API right here, so once you have a couple of characters in, you can see things showing up. And of course, if I tap into one of these, I can go ahead and get that way. And then we also have support for doing a full, what we call a full SOSL search. So instead of just the type ahead search is just the name field, and then we also have an affordance for doing a full search. So if you want to look up something that's not available in the type ahead, we still have a way to kind of do this search on Trumpet and then get a bunch of contacts back that are associated with the Trumpet. So you can go and check out does Eagle Gillespie here. And so this little database put together here is about 2,000 contacts in it. And once again, to kind of show some of these other examples, so if you can type in writer, and we have writers in there, you can get to them that way. There's no one named that. And readers. Oh, reader. I knew there was one in here. Yeah. Here's James Davis utility meter reader. All right, so let's go back and check out some of the components of how this works. So this was the interaction spec we put together for this, and these are the screens kind of laid out here. You can see here's the home page, the various states of search, and then examples of detail pages. And I just wanted to kind of deconstruct the navigation. This is actually a tricky thing when designing search interfaces for the phone. They look deceptively easy. Like, oh yeah, you just do these couple things and these pages all kind of link together. But let's just take a look here. So when I type into here, when I tap into this, we transition to this 0 state, right? And from there, you can go ahead and start typing. And we get the clear button right here. We have this cancel button. If you cancel from here, it takes you back to the home page. If I tap on one of these guys here, we kind of skip all these steps and go right to the detail. Same from here, when we start typing, again, we go right to the detail. To get to things that are not available in type ahead, if you have a term here, we provide this affordance, and you can see it down here as well. Like the last thing in the list is the actual term itself. So you want to search on trumpet, right? We can get these results from here. I think the tricky part here is like, what happens when you tap into this, right? So if I tap into here, I actually go back to this screen, right? But if I cancel, I go back to here. And then this button back here gets me back to the home page. So it's funny, as we were kind of putting this together, and Danielle Berg, we kind of thank in a couple later slides, helped us with the front end. And there were a few questions like, wait, how does this all kind of fit together? When you see users using an interface like this, they'll move through it really, really quickly if it's built kind of correctly. But when you build it, you're like, wait a second, does this really make sense? You can question yourself. Another slide that I kind of wanted to emphasize here was just how we're exposing, we're marrying up the search experience with the system's capabilities. So what we're doing is like, by default, we're providing with a 0 state. We're showing you recents. Recents are really fast to get to. They're really fast to query, really fast to, there's no permissions on them, so we can get those to you really quickly. As you start typing, since we're typing against the name field only, that, again, is fairly fast to get to things. And if users can't find that, then we expand and do a full SOSL search. So this gives the user a way to kind of broaden their search without throwing the entire system at them at once, right? The UI eases them into a way to expand the corpus of what they're searching. And corpus is the word that like the cool kids in search use for the body of stuff. Cool or nerdy, same thing. Okay, so now Mark is going to talk about implementation.
So let's dive into the gory details. So I'm more of a backend developer. I'm not really a JavaScript application developer. So I started from an existing application, and fortunately there is a lot around for Salesforce. I chose the mobile pack AngularJS. There are a ton of others with your favorite JavaScript framework. Oh, by the way, if you wonder why the demo look great, it's not my fault. We have to mention Danielle Berg for that, who has been helping us with the front-end development, and she has done some CSS magic so that it looks that good. So this application is a full JavaScript client. There is no smartness on the client, on the server. That being said, I chose to host them as Visualforce pages. It's really to simplify the deployment Alternatively, I could have put the application on Heroku and have this application discussing with Salesforce. So that's another possibility. This demo was a mobile web application, but it's very easy to turn that into one tab into Salesforce One, or even package the application as an hybrid application that you can then install on your mobile. So now let's look at the different API that we use for this demo. There are three main API. The first one is SOSL. We use SOSL to get the recently viewed item, also known as MRU for most recently used. The second one is this new Winter 15 API called Search Suggested Record, which is available as REST and allow you to type ahead the name of records. And of course, the last one that you may know about is SOSL to perform a full text search. Next slide. So let's start with this first screen, the recently viewed item. This is implemented with SOSL. So it's really a regular SOSL with the only difference being this scope statement using scope MRU that you add to your SOSL statement. There are several API for getting MRU. I chose this one because it allows you to get any field from the contact. I have also to mention what I call the cold start issue. For new users, they wouldn't have any result in the MRU. And so you still want a zero state screen for this user. So in that case, you would probably switch to displaying the last modified contact so that a new user doesn't start empty. Next up, the type ahead. So we have introduced this new API. I copied here the REST endpoint. It's a very simple API. There are two parameters. The first one is the entity you want to search for. The second one are the query term as typed by the user. And there is also a third one which is optional, which is a number of results that you want to get from the service. So we have many customers who are already implementing type ahead because it's very useful functionality. And today, what they do is they use SOSL with what we call phrase wildcard. So you have an example here. A phrase wildcard is a sequence of terms between double quotes, and the last character is a wildcard. And it works, but it's not optimized when you have multi-term in your query. If you were to look at the log we have, you would see that the slowest query are wildcard query, and the top worst query, out of the top worst query, 50% are multi-term wildcard. So we improved that with Winter 15, and we improved that in two directions. The first one is that we introduce a new specialized index, and the second one, we have a specific level agreement for this type of query. So I'll dive into that. So a specialized index. So there is confusion sometimes, so I will precise here. When I say index, I'm not talking about a database index. I'm talking about a full text index. To serve the type ahead queries and also to serve SOSL, we have a separate full text search engine, and we don't go through the database for this query. So that being said, how, as a rule of thumb, how can you assess the performance of a search query? So typical performance of a search query is a direct function of the selectiveness of its term. So if you have one term that match many results, it will be costly to evaluate. And with a phrase wildcard query, you combine selective terms, the term without the wildcard, with a very unselective term. Typically, one character with one wildcard is very unselective. So to fix that, we have used what we call n-gram. So before, one term was a key in the index. Now we are combining multiple terms, and so 2 terms or 3 terms are key in the index. So what it means is that we don't have to join between terms, and now phrase wildcard with multiple terms is very selective. The second thing that we improve is this specific SLA. So when the system is overloaded, when you have a peak of queries that the system cannot deal with, we can throw away some type-ahead query. As a comparison with SOSL, the query would be queued, and so the response time would be longer, and also the timeout will be longer. So some note about the limitation of this new API. Contrary to SOSL, you cannot have any where clause, and you have a limited number of fields that you can return. So we just return the ID and the name. It has to be scoped on one entity. As I said, most entities are supported. There is maybe a dozen that are not like feeds. But most of the entities, even the custom objects, are supported with this API. And you also need to have 3 or more characters to get results with this API. So some advice for you as a client of this API. Although we have a specific SLA, you still need to follow a set of best practice. The first reason is that, of course, you don't want to overload the system. And the second one is that the type-ahead API requests, they are accounted for into the REST API call limit. So on the developer edition, this limit is 15,000 calls per day, and it varies depending on your edition and your license. So what a well-behaved client should do? The first thing is that you should cache the result from previous query. A typical use case is a user type in his query, change his mind, remove some character. You don't want to issue again a request for this because you already have the results. The second thing is that you don't want to send a query for every keystrokes. We advise you to wait some time to have a delay between 2 keystrokes. A typical rule of thumb would be 200 milliseconds between two requests. And last thing, you should not send query with less than 3 characters. You won't get any result, but it will still be accounted for into the request call limit. So that was it for the type-ahead. Next one is the full text search. So for this screen, we use SOSL. SOSL is the main API for searching. It has been there for a long time. It is available in REST, in Apex. It is available in SOAP. So for those who are not familiar with SOSL, I have an example here. So you specify a bunch of full text terms. Then you specify which field you want to search against. And finally, you define the type of object that you want to get. And in this statement, the type of object, contact, ID, name, address, you can put most of SOSL construct in it. So you can have where clause, you can have order by. And that's about it. This is the free search API that we use in this demo. I want to mention that there is something that we have not shown and used in the demo because it's not available for contact yet. With Winter 15 release, we have introduced the support for snippets, and it's available for article. And so what is a snippet? A snippet is a small extract of the text of the document where the query match. So it's very useful because it can provide your user with some context as to why we return this result for this query. So it's easier for the user to assess if the results are relevant. And last thing, there is a different typed API for articles. It's kind of similar to this one. And this API also allows to get query suggestion. So very similar to what we have seen on the Google mobile example. Instead of getting a suggestion of record, we get suggestion of query that you can then issue to get results. So last thing, I listed a bunch of resources that are useful for developing such an application. Just want to talk about the first one. In the next few days, you will be able to access to the source code of this demo. I will upload that as soon as possible, and so you will be able to install it, tweak it, and use it as you see fit. And that's about it for our session. Just need to mention that we have another search session next Thursday. It will be amazing.
This is information about, we'd like to put a plug in for user experience research. So if you want to help out with helping shape the product, speak to the user. This is actually on this floor, user experience section, and you can sign up to be a volunteer and get involved with research. So now we'll take any questions that you might have. Sure.
Can you talk louder?
Is this available for the desktop version or is it only for mobile?
No, it's available for... We initially introduced a new API for Salesforce 1, but it's available for any client.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
So will snippets only be available for articles, or can you use them against the text area?
So in Winter 15, it's only articles. We plan to expand that in the future, but it's only on articles so far. It's very useful when you have entities with a lot of text like article. Less useful for an account, but for article, it's very useful.
Thanks. We'll stick around up front in case you want to ask some questions up here. Thank you.